Okay, I'm going to try something a little bit different today because I usually sit and I'm tired of sitting. So I'm going to stand today. Anyway, as you may or may not know, it is Wednesday. Wednesday, in case of the week of a holiday, is the day that new comic books come out. Said that before. You haven't heard it before. That's okay. Anyway, I bought 4 things today, as I deemed the highlights of the week. And in the first video, I'm going to do 2 videos like I did last time. In this first half, I'm going to talk about the DC side of things, which includes Batman 701 and Superman 701. So let's jump right into it with the Batman 701, featuring a very, very nice Tony Daniel cover. Now, this is Batman 700 was written by Grant Morrison and featured an all-star art team by Frank Quitely, Scott Collins, David Finch, Andy Kubert, and Tony Daniel. And it was then announced that when Batman 701 came about, that Grant Morrison was going to stay on for an additional 2-part story arc that was solicited and is the bridge between Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis, almost like 2 years after the fact. Okay, like over a year, like a year and a half after the fact. Anyway, Batman is, this is literally, picks up at the end of R.I.P. You may literally want to reread R.I.P. before you read this, because it literally picks up right after it. Grant Morrison, for some reason, felt the need to go back and tell the story. I don't know why. I was able to kind of assume what happened to him, but if Grant Morrison wants to grace us with another issue of Batman, I will begrudgingly accept this. He's twisted my arm enough. And it's literally, it leads from the end of R.I.P. literally to the beginning of Final Crisis. This issue ends with Batman at Orion's death site. So it's literally, and it's got a nice little countdown to Omega up in the cover, kind of giving us an indication about how close Batman is to really meeting his final demise in Final Crisis. And like I said, it starts right after R.I.P. He's in the water after the helicopter crash, and it ends with him and Orion's grave, or not grave, but death site in Final Crisis. So this is literally the bridge from there to there. So if you were curious and you weren't able to gather, because you know what? You're not the world's greatest detective. I'm not the world's greatest detective. So Grant Morrison felt the need to allow us the chance to fully understand point A to point B. There's not a lot of typical Grant Morrison here. He presents a very straightforward story that just simply, like it says, bridges the gap between R.I.P. and Final Crisis. It is labeled on the cover even as R.I.P. the Missing Chapter. So if there's ever an absolute edition of Batman R.I.P., this is probably going to be included. Anyway, it's a good story too. It's basically a lot of Batman's internal kind of recovering from the whole situation, trying to fully understand what's going on, and then addressing what I assume are going to be plot lines in the future with Thomas Hurt, because there's a few things here that are left unresolved. So Batman is then called away by Superman to naturally take part in Final Crisis. So, like I said, this is literally that bridge. Grant Morrison presents a very straight, linear story, and Tony Daniel does a little bit different art here. He doesn't have an inker. He inks himself, to my understanding. And we get a pretty good, it's a little bit different style. Honestly, I like it better when he's inked by somebody like Sandu Floria. So it's still good. I think it's on par with his not Final Crisis, sorry, his R.I.P. stuff. But reading this, it makes me want to go back and read R.I.P. just to kind of see how we got here. So I imagine if you're interested, the reading order is probably going to be R.I.P., Batman 701 and 702, then the last rights issues of Batman, and then Final Crisis. There'll probably be some definitive reading order released by DC because they're interesting like that. But if you like Batman, if you like Grant Morrison's Batman, he's given us another issue of Batman this month. I felt the need to buy it because I like Batman and I like Grant Morrison. And I liked R.I.P. and Final Crisis. So you know what? I'm okay with something like this. Again, we're not detectives. We may not have figured out what happened. So Grant Morrison is being nice enough to give it to us right here. So check it out. It's pretty good. Anyway, moving on to something that I was eagerly awaiting ever since it was announced, even before then almost. Superman 701 by J. Michael Straczynski. Whoop, there we go. J. Michael Straczynski worked with Marvel for a really long time, and a lot of people were kind of wondering if he'd ever go to DC. And I figured that it was a no-brainer that eventually he would go to DC. So as his run on Thor winded down, it was announced that he was going to DC and he was going to write The Brave and the Bold, which has been good. He's done some really erratic team-ups and very done-in-one type stories, which I really like. The fact that he's doing these done-in-ones as opposed to bigger story arcs with The Brave and the Bold. So it was really, really great to see him come over to DC. And as I knew, J. Michael Straczynski is quite potentially the biggest Superman fan on the planet. He loves Superman. So the minute he was announced as coming here, I then had to think, when is he going to take on Superman? And he did. And it was launched that he was going to do a graphic novel with Superman, and then it was announced that he was going to take over the Superman monthly title. And I could not have been happier, and after reading this issue, I was not disappointed. J. Michael Straczynski, following New Krypton, Superman basically realizes, he tells a story of Superman realizing that he's lost touch with the very people that he's supposed to protect. So this is J. Michael Straczynski having him walk across America to reconnect with people. Now, of course, here comes the inevitable Forrest Gump comparisons, but no, that's not what this is. Now, Superman's been off dealing with New Krypton. Before that, it was Final Crisis. Before that, it was Infinite Crisis. Superman's been dealing with a lot of stuff and hasn't necessarily slowed down to just look at the world around him. So, J. Michael Straczynski is telling this story. It's called Grounded. It's going to have 12 parts. And it's Superman reconnecting with America. And for all of you out there that think Superman is just some overpowered guy who feels the need to lecture to people, you read this book. This is J. Michael Straczynski giving us not an authoritative lecturing Superman. This is J. Michael Straczynski having Superman legitimately reconnect with people. He is walking across America. There is a touching scene in this book where Superman encounters a girl that's going to jump off a building. And instead of doing the whole, I'm Superman, I'm going to lecture you about why this is a bad idea, he doesn't do that. No. He listens to her. He lets her talk about the problems that she's having. And listens. Completely, doesn't say anything. Lets her talk. And then he responds. Not in a lecture, but in a legitimate response. And then tells her. And then responds it back to her. And then when she says she wants to think about it or have a moment, he waits. Presumably hours. For her. He doesn't sit there the whole time and lecture her. He waits. This is a Superman that I can get behind. This is a Superman who is legitimately trying to reconnect with the very people that raised him almost. This is Superman helping that guy find out what's wrong with his car. This is Superman helping that person organize the store cabinet. This is Superman doing what he can to reconnect with the American people. To almost, in a way, reconnect with us, the readers. Because this is not Superman flexing his muscles and throwing missiles into the sun. This is not Superman beating down intergalactic alien gods. This is Superman walking across America to reconnect with you and me. And while I really enjoyed it, it's not necessarily perfect. The art of Eddie Barrows is a little shaky in places. I think as the art goes on, he will get much more solid. But I think that he has done a really, really great job. And I think that as the art goes on, he will definitely get stronger. He's got great inks by J.P. Meyer. And it's a little shaky at times, but he does a really good Superman. He's from Blackest Night Superman. He did some issues of Action Comics, so I think he'll be really good. But J. Michael Straczynski, I think, is off to an amazing start with Superman. This is Superman helping out the average person. This is Superman helping out you and me. If you didn't like Superman, this may be the arc that makes you decide that Superman, you know what, maybe he's not so bad. Anyway, Batman 701 and Superman 701, both really good. I would investigate both of them. If at least to give Superman 701 a try. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Otherwise, I think you guys might enjoy it. Anyway, that wraps up the first half. I'm going to be back to talk about Astonishing Spider-Man Wolverine and Thanos Imperative.